Why might Jesus have been seen as a reincarnation of Horus?
Well, the similarities are absolutely amazing. And probably the most interesting and clearest link of all is the resurrection was part of the popular myth of Horus used to embellish the story of Jesus' activities. Hello everybody, welcome to the 27th episode of the Quintology Files. Today we're going to have a bit of fun. We're going to look at the parallels between Horus, the ancient Egyptian deity, and Jesus, and try and identify whether it points to a deeper truth. Now, imagine you were born in Egypt around the year AD 275. Jesus left 240 years earlier. A generation is usually measured as being around 25 years. So there have now been 10 successive generations of Christians. The basic ideas about Christianity must be all settled and agreed. Yeah? Absolutely not. Arguments raged on many aspects of belief. And it would be another 50 years before Emperor Constantine convened the Council of Nicaea in 325 to define exactly what Christians believed.
So tell us about our Egyptian friend born in AD 275.
Yes, imagine you're Faisal. You're brought up in a cultured Egyptian household, gaining a good knowledge of the most popular deities of your country. These were the trinity of Osiris, his wife Isis, and their son Horus. Indeed, these have been the most popular deities across the entire Roman Empire until challenged by this Jewish upstart called Jesus. Then you decide to read some Christian texts, starting with the Gospels. As Faisal is completely astonished. When he reads the Gospels, he finds the narrative of Jesus' birth and the detailed descriptions of so many of the miracles that Jesus performed are almost carbon copies of the narrative of the birth of Horus and the miracles performed by Horus. How can this be? The answer, Faisal concludes, the answer to this riddle is obvious. Like all Egyptians, and indeed most Christians, you believed in reincarnation. Faisal concludes that Jesus must be a reincarnation of Horus.
Why might Jesus have been seen as a reincarnation of Horus?
Well, the similarities are absolutely amazing. Let us recap what a cultured Egyptian would have learned of ancient Egyptian beliefs, perhaps before becoming a Christian. He would have learned the greatest divinities were the linked trinity of Isis, Osiris, and Horus. The miraculous impregnation of the perpetual virgin Isis, the Isis Mary, by her late husband, the god Osiris, who had been murdered and naturally, as a god, ascended to heaven. From this exalted station, Osiris impregnated his wife, Isis, doing so in a way whereby she remained a virgin. Horus was born on the most auspicious day, December the 25th. This is the date by which, when astronomers were tracking the rising of the sun, the big concern was that as the climate got colder, the sun was moving away. They waited to see when the sun stopped moving, the solstice by definition. Because of the viewpoint where an orbit looked side on, when you get to the edge it looks like it's stationary but it's still moving. There are a few days where the sun appears not to move, it's helical rising. And the first day you can measure any degree of movement is December the 25th, dawn on December 25th. So then everyone celebrates because you know the sun is moving back, and that is the promise of spring and summer to come. So it's almost the most auspicious day in the calendar, December the 25th. That's when Horus was born. The arrival of the three kings happened a few weeks later. So what are the three kings? The three kings are the main stars in Orion's belt. And the helical rising of Orion's belt is in mid-January. So the baby Horus is soon welcomed by the three kings. The multiplying of bread. There are many, many texts of Horus multiplying bread, usually starting with 7 loaves and then multiplying them to distribute bread to thousands. I haven't come across any references to fish though, so that could be a point of difference. What is documented though, Horus restored eyesight by mixing his spittle with the mud and then wiping it on the blind person's eye, much like Jesus did. As discussed a few weeks ago, there are many descriptions of Horus being accompanied by 12 helpers. Their exploits, Horus and his 12 helpers, are described in the book of Amduat. And we have copies of the book of Amduat dating back to 1070 BC. Also, similar stories in the book of Gates. We have copies dating back to 1200 BC. And then we read, Jesus picked 12 disciples. And probably the most interesting and clearest link of all is the resurrection. The resurrection of Osiris by Horus and his mother Isis. Slight differences. Copied almost exactly in the Gospel of John, chapter 11, as the story of Lazarus. Lazarus is a direct transliteration of the god Osiris. The story of Jesus resurrecting the body of Lazarus is the most striking of all the miracles he performed. But when you look closely, it quickly becomes apparent that this story is incredibly closely modelled on the ancient myth of the resurrection of the Egyptian god Osiris by his son Horus. The Egyptian Book of the Dead describes the death and entombment of Osiris, followed by his bodily resurrection by Horus in the ancient city of Anu, later known by its Greek Ptolemaic name of Heliopolis. Here, the death and the resurrection of Osiris were annually reenacted. Details of the biblical account in the Gospel of John include numerous parallels. Anu is referred to as the place of multiplying bread, whilst Bethlehem means, in Hebrew, the house of bread. Bethany, where Lazarus was resurrected, means the house of Anu. Beth equals house, Anu became Ani, Bethany. So, the Egyptian story of Osiris was very popular and widely known. Osiris was murdered, ascended to heaven from where he inseminated his wife Isis, who gave birth to Horus. Isis worked with Horus to resurrect his father Osiris, and the three were often considered together, forming a trinity. Now, the Semitic name for Osiris comes from the root Azar, from which is also derived the god's name of Ashur, the Assyrian people, and the modern country Syria. As Osiris was a god, in Hebrew it's prefixed Azar with El Azar, and in Greek and Latin the suffix to denote male is us. So what you have is El Azarus. In translation, the words run together into one word, Lazarus. Direct copy. Consequently, the raising of Lazarus at Bethanu is an obvious copy of Horus raising Osiris, El-Azar, at Anu. At the resurrection of Osiris, there were two sisters mourning, Isis and Nephthys. Guess what? Two sisters mourned for Lazarus, Mary and Martha.
So it sounds much like the annual ceremony of the old myth, which took place at the Heliopolis. But why include this in the Gospel of John?
Yes, I agree. It's very odd, because a significant number of people would have been familiar with the story of the resurrection of Osiris. So, was the author trying to conflate Horus with Jesus? And why? Did the author want to leverage the story of Jesus' miraculous works with a popular contemporary myth? If so, why is the plagiarism so blatant? Or did the author actually believe that Jesus was a reincarnation of Horus? Another surprising fact, given the stunning impact that such a resurrection would have had, is that none of the three synoptic gospels refer to the resurrection of Lazarus. That seems a rather stunning omission. Only John, which is believed to have been written decades after the synoptic gospels, only John includes the story. But he devotes 44 verses of chapter 11. It's a very detailed account. But no one is recorded as asking Lazarus the obvious question. Lazarus, what was it like? You had 4 days dead. What happened? Nobody asks that. Extraordinary.
What about the return to heaven?
Yeah, the ascension into heaven of both Osiris and of Horus is covered extensively in numerous pyramid texts. Over 29 have been identified, and the details extensively written about by a number of tenured Egyptologists. However, the ascension of Jesus merits only brief coverage in Luke 24 and a throwaway line in Mark 16:19, where it's claimed to have been witnessed by all 11 remaining disciples. Now, imagine you had witnessed this extraordinary event. Having travelled with Jesus for 3 years of his ministry, maybe you sometimes doubted whether he was the real thing. But then he was crucified, he was resurrected himself, and now you watch him walk into the light. Beam me up, Scotty. And he ascends. Now, neither Mark nor Luke were present at this, but they both claim that John was. And yet John never mentions this extraordinary event in his own gospel. Again, was part of the popular myth of Horus used to embellish the story of Jesus' activities? Now let's return to our hypothetical Egyptian chap, Faisal, in the 3rd century. He's not just educated and cultured, he's also quite religious, and he's now become a practicing Christian. He's joined the church. The more he studies Christian texts, the more convinced he is that Jesus is a reincarnation of Horus. Soon, our hero is elevated within the church to a bishopric and is selected by Athanasius to join the Coptic team travelling to the Council of Nicaea. Faisal becomes part of the clique, arguing for there to be a trinity. So, if you already knew the stories and descriptions told about Horus and his parents, and then read the Gospels, you might easily assume that Jesus must be a reincarnation of Horus. After all, gods were supposed to reincarnate at will. Now, let's take this speculation just a little bit further. Supposing Jesus really was a reincarnation of Horus. Actually, history paints Horus as one of the good guys. He was a teacher, an educator, a leader who helped the people rebuild after a great disaster. Horus is credited as a great teacher restoring civilization after the Great Flood. We think possibly a huge tsunami that swept up the Nile after that meteor impact. And he directed the rebuilding of the levees and the drainage all along the Nile, as well as directing the building of the great complex of the pyramids and the Sphinx. The miracles Horus is remembered for involve him feeding and healing people. The theology associated with that early time fits easily with what Jesus originally taught: the binary spiritual nature and the ability to save ourselves by living righteously. When looked at this way, there seems to be close parallels. Is it possible that Horus was an earlier reincarnation of Jesus? This may sound shocking and revolutionary, but two aspects are very surprising. Firstly, the volume of parallels where Jesus is recorded as doing things that Horus was associated with. Things that Horus did many thousands of years earlier. Secondly, the sheer similarity of the events surrounding the timing of the birth and the details of the individual miracles. It's as if the attention of the Gospel writers was to link Jesus' work to the record of Horus' activities. Surely, such blatant plagiarism makes sense only if the author believed Jesus was a reincarnation of Horus. Was Jesus reported as doing the same things to reinforce the belief he was the same person? Consider too, none of the synoptic gospel authors are believed to have ever met Jesus. Luke describes the many eyewitness accounts he has studied. Horus, Isis and Osiris were the most popular deities right across the Roman Empire at the time of Jesus. So many stories associated with Horus would have been common knowledge. As most of us, most of the people watching this little video in the 21st century, we are very familiar with the Bible stories of Jesus, but we know little or nothing of the stories associated with Horus. Inevitably, when we hear it, we tend to assume that which we don't know has been copied from that which we know. However, the dates don't work. The writings about Horus that I referred to go back thousands of years, up to 10,000 years before Jesus was supposed to be on earth. So separating fact from conjecture, I suggest, and this is now purely my conjecture, that Jesus had visited Earth at least once previously to his visit 2,000 years ago. Jesus may have been incarnate on Earth around 12,000 years ago and was remembered as Horus. And the ultimate irony? At the Council of Nicaea, we have the Egyptian contingent led by Athanasius campaigning for Jesus being Horus, part of a trinity. In the next episode, we shall look at other surprising pointers to the ancient gods of the Middle East being more than just imaginary idols. If you enjoyed this, please press like and please sign up as a subscriber and you'll get advance warning of what is coming. Thank you very much.